At the base of the German tank force is the Leopard 2 main battle tank of various marks. Save for some future variants, all German Leopard 2s in service right now are basically several conversions down from the Leopard 2A4 of the late 1980s. Buckle in because this is quite the family tree. Working chronologically, the 2A5 was a mid-90s upgrade to the 2A4, of which they converted 285. Today, no operational tank unit operates the 2A5, but the Army Combat Training Center's 3rd Company does operate the remaining 19 or so as an opposing force unit. Of the rest, 105 were sold to Poland, and 160 were converted into the new Leopard 2A6. 2A5 production had actually been cut short to allow for an additional 65 2A4s to be converted into 2A6s directly, for a total of 225. About 70 of these were converted into 2A6Ms around 2007, which added mine protection, although 20 were loaned to Canada. The Canadians later bought 20 Dutch 2A6s and gave them to Germany so they'd be able to keep their 2A6Ms. Those Dutch 2A6s were upgraded into the newer 2A7 by 2014, and they were the only base 2A7s to exist. The ones that didn't go to the Armored Training Center went to the 203rd Tank Battalion, which seems to have split them across at least 2 companies. Shortly after, in 2015, the 50 2A6Ms not loaned to Canada were upgraded into 2A6M+, which was intended to bring them to a 2A7 standard. As these were operated by the joint German-Dutch Tank Battalion, they received unit-specific command and control and battle management systems and redesignated 2A6M-A2. From 2019, the 2nd newest Leopard mark started to be delivered, the 2A7V. These were created by converting all 20 2A7s that existed, 16 2A6s, and 68 2A4s from storage. They were fully delivered by October of 2023. In parallel, the 2A6M-A3 and 2A6A3 were introduced to bring more tanks in line with the 2A7V standard to streamline logistics. These were created by converting 50 2A6M-A2s and 51 2A6s respectively. One of the primary differences is the MA3 has the mine protection plate while the A3 does not. Deliveries began in 2021 and are intended to be completed by 2026. Although 17 2A6A3s, or about a company and change, have already been removed from service to create the new 2A7A1s, the first of which roll out of the factory in October. The key feature of this variant is the integration of the Trophy Active Protection System. KMW are manufacturing new hulls for it, but the 2A6A3 turrets are being repurposed. Another completely new manufactured tank, the Leopard 2A8, is also planned to enter service. 18 were announced to be procured in May of 2023, with delivery to ideally begin in 2025. These were intended to replace 18 of the oldest 2A6s given to Ukraine, although the coming up 2A7A1 deliveries will fill that gap with the Lithuania-bound tank battalions sooner. In July of 2024, an additional 105 2A8s were added to their intent to procure under the same framework, to be delivered by 2030. So as of the making of this video, in service there should be about 104 Leopard 2A7Vs and 172 Leopard 2A6s of various marks, 101 of which will be of a 2A7V standard by 2026, plus about 19 2A5s in a training unit. However, a number of the 2A6s will be tied up in conversions, plus regular maintenance. An additional 17 partially new production 2A7A1s are on the way, and perhaps 123 fully new production 2A8s by 2030. But onto the unit organization. As the Leo is a manually loaded tank, each tank is crewed by 4 soldiers: a commander, gunner, loader, and driver. In terms of personal weapons, 2 MP7 personal defense weapons and 2 P8 pistols are carried per tank. Exactly who gets what depends on the situation, but the driver always gets a pistol, so the MP7s go to the turret crew. The tanks themselves are armed with a 120mm L55 smoothbore cannon. The newest L55A1 cannon was introduced with the 2A7V, allowing it to fire the higher pressure DM73 kinetic APFSDS round. Use of the programmable DM-11 high explosive fragmentation round that allows for point detonation, delayed point detonation, and airburst is also possible with a programming kit. As secondary weapons, the Leopard has a coaxial MG3 7.62 machine gun and the option to pintle mount another on the loader's hatch. The basic unit is the tank platoon, which consists of 4 tanks. The platoon is split into 2 sections called Hauptzüge, or half platoons. The platoon leader leads the first, while the deputy leads the second. Each has a wingman tank called a Kettenhund, or watchdog. The 3 tank commanders, excluding the platoon leader in some cases, are non-commissioned officers, generally at least Feldwebels. Feldwebel is the first rank in the Unteroffizier mit Portepee career path awarded when a sergeant candidate finishes their training. In Germany, there's separate career tracks and there's overlap in the pay grades. For example, Stabsgefreiter in the Enlisted career group are in the A5 pay grade, with Unteroffizier in the Specialist NCO group, while corporals in the Enlisted are in the A6 pay grade with the Stabsunteroffizier and the Specialist NCOs, unless the Stabsunteroffizier is in the A7 grade, which is shared with the Feldwebel. Senior NCO candidates pass through some of the junior ranks during a 3-year training period, from Soldat to Gefreiter in 3 months, to Obergefreiter after another 3 months, skipping over the higher Gefreiter grades to Unteroffizier after another 6 months, Stabsunteroffizier after another 12 months, and finally, Feldwebel after another 12 months, with a total of 36 months in temporary service by the time they enter as a unit leader. Promotion to Oberfeldwebel happens relatively quickly after another 2 years of service, so it's quite common for all tank commanders to be Oberfeldwebel. The deputy platoon leader can also be an Oberfeldwebel or a Hauptfeldwebel, the 3rd rank in the senior NCO career path, awarded after 3 years as an Oberfeldwebel. The platoon leader's rank, meanwhile, depends on the platoon. A tank company has 3 platoons: Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Alpha is meant to be led by a Hauptmann or captain at the lower A11 pay grade. Bravo is meant to be led by an Oberleutnant or Lieutenant, the lowest grades of officers. But Charlie is usually a Hauptfeldwebel. NCO platoon leaders are less common as a doctrinal thing in English-speaking armies, barring a severe officer shortage. I know a GWOT vet is currently typing a comment that a Lance Corporal led their platoon, but that sort of thing isn't supposed to happen, it just happens. But it's pretty common as a doctrinal thing in continental Europe, especially in countries with direct entry NCOs. The French adjutant and Italian marshal are other examples of this concept. The other tank crews are junior enlisted, generally between the ranks of Obergefreiter and Oberstabsgefreiter, and corporal and Stabskorporal in limited circumstances. Gefreiter variations are basically lance corporals with different times in service. The 2 bottom ranks of Soldat and Gefreiter aren't really seen in units due to time in training factoring into promotion requirements. In 2021, they added 2 new ranks at the top, Corporal and Stabskorporal. This was basically to make the junior enlisted career group more attractive with promotion opportunities at the 7 and 10 year marks. However, the number of corporals in a TO&E are limited. I'm told it's generally positions like the company commander's gunner. You usually want an experienced gunner in the CO's tanks so they don't have to be micromanaged while the CO is leading the company. Moving up, the 3 tank platoons are grouped under a company HQ. The HQ is consistent in structure, but the vehicle inventory differs between units based on their priority and whether they're deployed. It has 2 tanks to start, one for the company commander ranking Major, and one for the company operations officer or KEO ranking Hauptmann at the A12 pay grade, a higher pay grade than the Hauptmann platoon leader. So the company currently has a total of 14 tanks. It further consists of a company troop, the company Feldwebel troop, supply troop, and a maintenance troop. The company's senior NCO is the company Feldwebel, who normally ranks Oberstabsfeldwebel or Stabsfeldwebel and was previously a platoon leader. The company troop leader, meanwhile, is typically a Stabsfeldwebel or Hauptfeldwebel. Note that these ranks are just illustrative. Billets are often tied to a range of ranks in the same career group rather than one specific rank. To simplify it, the difference is the company Feldwebel troop is focused on personnel administration and logistics, while the company troop runs the company command post. The latter is responsible for helping the commander plan operations, develop orders, and update the situation map, so they're basically a mini S3 shop. The American equivalent would be how in the US Marine Corps, companies have both a first sergeant and a company gunnery sergeant which have a similar division. In terms of vehicles, the by-the-book version of the company HQ includes a Movak Eagle infantry mobility vehicle, a Fuchs APC, and a UTF 5-ton truck in the company troop. Another UTF 5-ton in the company sergeant's troop, a UTF 5-ton truck with a trailer in the supply troop, and a Greenliner G-Wagon in the maintenance troop. I'll reference some modifications based on my conversations with tankers, which could be unit dependent, so be forewarned. One tanker told me in his unit the Fuchs was generally not used except maybe on an EFP deployment, but another told me in his experience the Fuchs was used as a rear command post for mission planning and briefing. There's also usually an additional G-Wagon in the company troop, basically something the commander can drive around when they're not using a tank. And the maintenance troop usually gets a GSI Dingo for deployments. One tanker told me that in their experience, a Bufel armored recovery vehicle could also be included, as well as 2 motorcycles in the company troop to act as messengers during a radio blackout. Motorcycles had traditionally been part of the company HQ, but they got rid of them and are starting to bring them back in some cases. According to Zwilling, these were BMW F850 GS motorcycles procured for the VJTF mission, of which the 93rd Panzer Lehr and 393rd Panzer Battalions were a part of. Although another tanker told me that the motorcyclists are just in the staff company and they didn't mention organic Bufels, so that may have just been a VJTF thing. But regardless if recovery assets are organic to a company or attached from battalion, it can be assumed that Bufels are available when task organized. Another sample organization that dropped in 2023 and was shared with me suggests a much larger company HQ. They told me it wasn't realistic currently, but it could be a wartime reinforcement sort of thing. That org calls for 4 Eagles, 1 G-Wagon, and 2 UTF 15-ton trucks in the company troop. 1 Dingo, 1 UTF 5-ton, 1 GTF 5-ton armored truck, and 1 UTF 15-ton truck in the company Feldwebel troop, 2 UTF 5-tons with trailers in the supply troop, and a Dingo in the maintenance troop. But back to reality. When deployed, a tank company will be task organized as a reinforced company. Engineers, medics, joint fire observers, maintenance, and stuff like that. Tank companies usually swap a platoon with a Panzer Grenadier or Armored Infantry company from another battalion. So for example, a tank company could give up their Bravo platoon and receive an infantry platoon on Puma or Martyr as their new Delta platoon for a specific operation. The next level up, a basic German tank battalion, consists of 3 tank companies numbered 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. The battalion also has a 1st Staff and Supply Company, which has all of the battalion's staff and logistics elements. Generally, a battalion is commanded by a lieutenant colonel, and the 1st company has 2 tanks, for a total of 44 Leopard 2s in a battalion. The German army has 6 of these battalions, including a joint one with the Dutch. These are the 93rd Panzer Lehr Battalion, and the 104th, 203rd, 363rd, 393rd, and 414th Panzer Battalions. The 414th is the Joint Battalion, which is under the Dutch 43rd Mechanized Brigade, which is in turn under the German 1st Panzer Division. In this battalion, the Dutch operate a 4th Tank Squadron with cavalry traditions, with dual manning of the Staff Company and 5th Reserve Company. Of note, the 414th Panzer Battalion operates exclusively Leopard 2 A6M A2s and upgraded MA3s. I'm told the 363rd Battalion operates the Leopard 2 A6A3, and the 203rd used to only operate the oldest 2A6s. However, the 203rd is one of the battalions that's going to be relocated to Lithuania to form the new 45th Panzer Brigade together with the 122nd Panzer Grenadier Battalion and the rotational EFP battle group. The new brigade is planned to reach full operational capability by 2027. As such, the 203rd is priority for the newest tanks, and it's the battalion that lost the company of 2A6s that were donated to Ukraine. The 45th Brigade will join the 10th Panzer Division, which will become a deployable warfighting division under the moniker Division 25. Learn more about European tank companies with this video on French Leclerc tank units. I talk about basically the same stuff, including their NCO rank progression. I'll see you over there.